So I'm Clayton and I'm Professor of Comparative Cognition in the Department of Psychology at Cambridge University, and I study how crows think about the world and by extension also how humans do so, particularly interested in young children because like birds they have to think largely without words. I think the first one is Bill Thorpe. He was a man he was the first director of the sub-department of animal behaviour at Madingley here in Cambridge, and he was the founder of birdsong learning, which has now become a massive field, and one I did my PhD in, so I'm particularly fond of it. And of course the late Peter Marler, who tragically passed away recently, he did his work under Bill Thorpe's supervision, and that really was the start of birdsong. There's a couple of things that got to me. There's this book here, Learning an Instinct in Animals, and you can see it's very old, and my version is a bit tattered. That's because it's been well read. He says, the poor development in birds of any brain structures clearly corresponding to the cerebral cortex of mammals led to the assumption among neurologists not only that birds are primarily creatures of instinct, but also that they are very little endowed with the ability to learn. There is no doubt that this preconceived notion, based on a misconceived view of brain mechanisms, hindered the development of experimental studies on bird learning. And that, of course, has turned out to be absolutely true. Since then, people have realised that you don't want to simply black box things and say innate versus learning, that actually both contribute in complex ways. Pat Bateson has this lovely analogy of the baking of a cake. You can talk about the ingredients, the sugar, the eggs, the flour, and so on, and go into it. But when you take a bite of cake, you couldn't possibly say, this bit's egg and that bit's sugar, they've all blended together. So that was one important point I think this quote reveals very early on. I was an undergraduate at Oxford in the Edward Gray Institute of Field Ornithology in the Nico Tinbergen building, which is where the zoology and psychology are. And my mentor was Lord John Krebs. And he was a huge figure in the field, he still is. In animal behaviour in general, and his specialty was birds. And in fact, when I went to Oxford, I wasn't really sure whether to do zoology or psychology because I was interested in both. And it was John that persuaded me to pick zoology, because if I did zoology we could do lots of bird stuff. But it was through John Krebs that I got to know about birdsong. He did some of the seminal experiments on great tits, showing that great tits use their song as a territorial signal to repel the males.